Okay, good day, grade 9s. I trust that you are well. This lesson is just a recap and it serves as a revision lesson to help you for paper 1 section B, right? So remember there's going to be 5 topics that will be tested. The first being numeric and geometric patterns, then algebraic expressions, algebraic equations, functions and relationships, and lastly graphs. So let's start off with the last thing that I mentioned, and that is graphs, right? So, of course, you need to know how to plot a graph onto the Cartesian plane. That is something that you learned in grade 8 as well. But I'm going to show you an example where you need to find the equation of a straight line. Right? So let's say I'm given the Cartesian plane, which has 2 axes, of course. Right? So the Cartesian plane, it has 2 axes. It has our vertical axis, which is the y-axis, and it has an horizontal axis, which is the x-axis. Right? And let's say I'm given a decreasing graph that looks something like this. Right? Given a graph that looks something like this. Okay, and it extends to infinity on both sides. Now we need to find the equation of this graph. Of course, we are given some other information as well, but before I continue, the question that they could ask you is this graph an increasing or decreasing graph? And the answer is it's a decreasing graph. Now when I was in school, I figured out that the easiest way to identify an increasing or decreasing graph, just draw a cappy or a cap like this and write ID, right? So an increasing graph is shaped like such. Basically, it means that as the x values are increasing, the y values are increasing as well. And the opposite is also true. As the x values are decreasing, the y values are decreasing. It follows a direct proportional relationship. Whereas a decreasing graph is shaped like this. So ID, the decreasing graph looks like this, where there's an inverse relationship between the x value and the y value. As the x values are increasing, the y values are decreasing. And as the x values are decreasing, the y values are increasing. So let me just repeat that. As the x values are increasing, the y values are decreasing. As the x values are decreasing, the y values are increasing. That's a decreasing graph. So by looking at this, this is a decreasing graph, which implies that the gradient, the slope of the graph, has to be negative. Very important. Now, that being said, we need to find the equation of the graph, and we are given some information as well. We're not just left with the question as such. Right? We are given 2 coordinates on this Cartesian plane. Right? Of course, by looking at this graph, this is the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept, you let x equals 0. This is the x-intercept. The graph is crossing the x-axis. And to find the x-intercept, you let y equals to 0. So let's say we are given this coordinate as 0, 3. And we are given another random coordinate here, which is 4, negative 2, as an example. Right? And we are required to find the equation of the graph. Now, if you can recall, and the equation of any straight line is y is equal to mx plus c, right? Where m is the gradient and c represents the y-intercept. Now, to find the gradient is basically the change in y over the change in x. So it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So now let's look at the coordinates and let's identify our x1, y1 and our x2, y2 coordinates. Let's say this coordinate 0, 3 is x1, y1, and let's say this coordinate is x2, y2, right? So now I'm going to substitute these values. Remember, coordinates is always in the form of xy. I'm going to substitute these coordinates into my formula. So I have in brackets negative 2, that's y2, minus 3 all over x2, which is 4, minus 0. What is that equal to? Negative 2 minus 3, that's negative 5, over 4 minus 0, that's 4. So the gradient of the graph is negative 5 over 4. So let's write that out, right? Let's write that out. We have y is equal to negative 5 over 4x plus c. Now, of course, we do not know the c value, but I know that the c value should be 3. And to prove that, or let's say we are not even given the y-intercept, we can take any coordinate, whether the coordinate of the y-intercept or any random coordinate that we have, and we can substitute the x and y values and solve for the value of c. So let me show you what I mean. Right, so let's say we have y is equal to negative 5 over 4x plus c. Right, let's use the coordinate 0 and 3. In the place of y, I'm going to substitute 3 is equal to negative 5 over 4 times 0 plus c. So c is equal to 3. So what is the equation of the straight line? The equation of the straight line is y is equal to negative 5 over 4x plus 3. Right? And you can also take your calculator and test it. Right? If I substitute 4 in the place of x, the 4's will divide off. It's negative 5 plus 3, which is negative 2. So this is the equation of the straight line. So you should be able to find the equation of a straight line. Right. Right. Now, that being said as well, on the topic of graphs, let's say we are given two straight lines. We're given y is equal to 2x plus 1, and we are given y is equal to x minus 1. So of course, by now you should know how to plot coordinates onto the Cartesian plane. But let's say I'm given these two coordinates and I ask you, what is the point of intersection, right, between these two straight lines? Now, of course, you can plot the graph and you can easily see it on the straight line as well. Or I can also solve it algebraically. I can say that I have the first equation, which is 2x plus 1. It's equal to the second equation, which is x minus 1. And now I can solve for x. So, of course, algebraic equations are in your test. You should know how to solve this by now. X is on one side of the equation, numbers on the other side. So I have 2x. I'm going to take this x to the other side. It's minus x is equal to negative 1. We take this to the other side, minus 1. So x is equal to negative 2. Right? So they intersect when the x value is negative 2. Now I can substitute negative 2 in either the first or the second equation to find the y value. So let's use the first equation. Y is equal to 2x plus 1. So when I substitute 2 in the equation, I get negative 4 plus 1, which is negative 3. Or you could also substitute in the second equation, which is y is equal to negative 2 minus 1, which will also give you negative 3. So it doesn't matter which equation you substitute, you're still going to get the same y value. So what is my final, what is the point of intersection? What is the coordinate of the point of intersection? Remember, coordinate is always in the form of xy. It's negative 2, negative 3, and that is the coordinate for the intersection. Right. Now, moving on from there, algebraic equations, all expressions also form a large part of your paper. You should be able to factorize, whether removing the common factor, removing the common factor, or the difference of two squares, or factorizing a trinomial using the window method, which I believe is the easiest way to factorize a trinomial. But let's take an example. Let's say I'm required to simplify this expression. I'm given x squared minus x squared minus x minus 6 all over x minus 3. Right. So first and foremost, I can factorize the numerator. Now, to factorize always includes brackets. So this is a trinomial. So I'm going to use the window method. I have x squared, negative 6, and I open my two windows. Right, I have negative 1x. So what two values, when multiplied to each other, should give me x squared? Now, the obvious answer is x times x gives me x squared. Now, what two factors multiplied to each other gives me negative 6? Now, there's quite a lot. There's negative 6 and 1, and there's quite a lot. But you should bear in mind that when I cross multiply, right, the sum of the products of that cross multiplication should give me the middle term, which is negative 1x. So I'm going to choose negative 3 and positive 1. So when I do cross multiply, when I say negative 3 times x, it's negative 3x. And when I say 1 times x, it's plus 1x. Thus, sorry, it's my silly mistake. There should be 2 here. Now that makes sense, right? So let me just correct myself. Right. Okay. Apologies for that. So the factors should be -3 and 2. And well, not really the factors, but the combination should be -3 and 2. And why? Because -3 times +2 gives you -6. And now when I cross multiply, -3 times x should give me -3x, and +2 times x should give me +2x. Now I can calculate the sum. -3x plus 2x gives me -1x. And I'm going to group it horizontally. So one factor is x minus 3 and the other factor is x plus 2. So what is this equal to? It's equal to, instead of writing x squared minus x minus 6, I can rewrite that as x minus 3 and or multiplied by x plus 2 all over x minus 3. And at this point, I can divide off x minus 3 divided by x minus 3. It's 1, 1. So therefore, my final answer is x plus 2. Right? That is how I can simplify this expression. Right? Now, let me get this right. Okay. Okay, so with regards to equations, let's say I'm given an equation like this. Okay, sorry about that. Let's say I'm given an equation as such. Let's say this is 3x minus 2 is equal to, let's say, 10. And I'm required to solve for x. Right? Now, my first question to you is, if I look at the left-hand side of this equation, right, how many terms do we have? We have 2 terms. Right? So if I look at the first term, I can apply the distributive property, and I can distribute the 2 inside the brackets. So 2 times x is 2x, 2 times 1 is 2. And if I look at the second term, what number is in front of the brackets here? The number that's in front of the brackets is -1. So I'm going to take -1 and I'm going to distribute it into the brackets as well. So -1 times 3x is -3x, and -1 times -2 is +2 is equal to 10. Now, just like any other equation, my final answer should be x is equal to something. So I'm going to isolate x. I want x to be on the left-hand side of the equation, and I want the numbers to be on the other side. So I have 2x minus 3x is equal to 10. I'm going to take 2 to the other side, minus 2, minus 2. So -1x is equal to 10 minus 4, that should be 6. And to get rid of the coefficient, I need to divide both sides by -1. X is equal to, remember -1 will divide off, so I'm left with 1x is equal to -6. So test to see if that is true. In your calculator, substitute -6 in the place of x. Remember, whenever we substitute, we make use of brackets, and see what you get. Right, so let me quickly do that with you here. This is actually quite interesting. When I substitute it, I get 10 on the left hand side, and what do I have on the right hand side? 10. So I know my equation is perfectly balanced as well. Now, with equations, I could be required to factorize as well. So let me show you what I mean. Right, let me show you what I mean. Let's say I'm required to solve for x, so I have x squared minus 5x minus 24 is equal to 0. Right? So I'm required to factorize this side of the equation. Right? So I'm going to use the window method to do that. I have x squared minus 24, and I'm going to open up my 2 windows, and the middle term is negative 5x. So I have x times x, which is x squared, and what 2 terms should I have here, or what 2 numbers should I have here that should give me negative 24? Well, there's quite a lot, but remember, when I cross multiply, the sum of those products needs to give me negative 5x, the middle term that is there. So let's try -8 and 3, because -8 times 3 is negative 24. So I'm going to make it +3 and negative 8. So when I do cross multiply, -8 times x is -8x, and 3 times x is plus 3x. So when I add these two together, it should give me negative 5x. So now I can take my two factors, which is x minus 8 and x plus 3, and that is x minus 8 and x plus 3. Now remember, if x minus 8 is equal to 0, that means 0 times whatever this value is should give me 0. Or if x plus 3 is equal to 0, then multiplied by whatever the value of x minus 8 is should also give me 0 as well. So when you reach this point, I basically say x minus 8 is equal to 0 or x plus 3 is equal to 0, and I solve these two equations. So x is equal to 8 or x is equal to negative 3, right, as such. Right. Now with regards to exponential equations, right, I'm just going to do a quick example. Let's solve for x. Let's say we have 10 raised to the power of x plus 1 is equal to 100, right? Now, the key is to ensure that the two bases are the same. So if I have 2 raised to the power of placeholder is equal to 2 raised to the power of 2, what is the value of placeholder? The value of placeholder should be 2. So if the bases are the same, it implies that the exponents are the same as well. So instead of writing 100, I can write 100 as 10 raised to the power of 2. And this is basically 10 raised to the power of x plus 1. So since the bases are the same, the two bases are 10, it implies that the exponents should also be equal to each other. It's x plus 1 is equal to 2, and I can solve for x. So x is equal to 2 minus 1, x is equal to 1. So when I substitute 1 here, it's 10 raised to the power of 2, which is 100, right? Now the last example that I like to share with you, remember you need to recap on functions, the input and the output, number patterns with diagrams, right? How to find the general rule, or maybe the 50th term, or if they give you the term value, you need to find the position. All of that content is quite important as well. Now, the last question is a word problem. Let's say we have the sum of half and a certain number is 10. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is let that certain number be x, because we do not know what the certain number is. So I'm going to say let the certain number be x, right? So I'm going to say the sum of half and a certain number is 10. So it's going to be half plus x is equal to 10, right? I can form an equation and I can solve for x from here. So it's going to be x is equal to 10 minus half. It depends on the word problem. So with word problems, you need to read it very carefully to see what they are asking of you, right? And that should give you 19 over 2, right? So if they say double a number, it basically means times 2, etc. Like let's say double a certain number, that's going to be 2x, or triple a certain number, that's going to be 3x, or half a certain number, that's going to be half x, half times x. So just read the question carefully and you should be fine. Okay, grade 9s, I wish you all the best for your paper that you are going to write.